My name is Brian Inge. I'm with the Clark County Association of Realtors. And today we have a few questions that we're going to ask you about housing in the upcoming sessions. So again, I want to thank you for taking out time out of your busy day to share with us some of the thoughts that you have about housing in the upcoming sessions. So anything you may want to say before we get started?
Oh, well, just thank you for the opportunity to speak and speak to your world, I guess. And yeah, and happy to be here.
Thank you again. Oh, so I'm going to just start right into it. So how should the legislature address the housing shortage in Washington?
Well, I've done some more work on this, I guess, and some research. And, I'm finding that Clark County is one of the fastest growing counties in Washington state. So we are third behind King and Snohomish. And so at least in the last 10 years, so since 2010. And so we've increased almost 18%, which is about 74,000 people. So clearly we know that we need more housing. I think what we need to do is also identify what type of housing we need. Is it affordable housing? Is it low income housing? Do we want to own it? Do we want to rent it? Right. So we're kind of missing a lot of information, I guess. And I think to begin with, we need to make sure that government has the correct policies and regulations and tax structure to make sure that we're making it easier, not harder, for us to build those homes. Because regardless of whether you want to own them or rent them, we still need to be able to build them easier and quit stacking so many costs on top of that to make it more expensive for everyone. Right now, there is a group meeting. It's a work session of the GMA. And when they're talking about adding in climate and equity into this. And so this would be more parameters within these regulations. And I think that, you start down that path, particularly in a session where it's going to be remote and we don't even know how it's going to work. And so I'm concerned about how everyone gets their ideas on the table and everyone is listening. So, but, adding to that right now, if we don't have an outcome-based answers, right, and we don't know what we're looking for yet, then that concerns me. So I would like to see not just a work group, but the GMA looked at broadly, and where we add in some metrics of goals that we want to meet, and how do we find them? How many houses do we need? Where do we need them? Who needs them? That type of thing. So I don't know if that's going to happen or if it could happen next year, but I think we just need to make sure that what we're doing isn't going to make it more difficult to build. And so we don't want to be looking at new taxes either, and we don't want to be increasing taxes either. I mean, we already are looking at that REIT that really just took effect, right? So we've got to even see where that goes as well with the new REIT tax structure. So.
Well, I think that's a great response, Senator. It sounds like you have identified the issues, you got a strategy, and you're looking out for the challenges. Very good. So my next question: what approach will you have in approaching the session as it relates to revenue? And I think you sort of talked about it in terms of being careful about no new taxes.
Because right now, the budget issue that we have, which is about $4.5 billion short, which started out at $9 billion. So even though we're in this pandemic, we're seeing that our revenues are building because of businesses being allowed to open up to the point that they are. So, and I think that if this isn't a long-term thing, this is a short-term thing until we can get business back to business, because we know that our revenues were expanding even more than we thought every single time we got a revenue report. So if we are allowing business to get back to business safely, then I think that is going to help with the budget in a way that I don't want to be, like I said, increasing taxes, because any taxes that happen, even if they're so supposedly temporary, we know that the B&O tax was created in 1933 and it was a temporary tax, right? That was a long time ago. It's not temporary.
Right.
So, I'm concerned about that. Now, in the meantime, we may have to cut a few things. There's a certain amount of portion of the budget that we can't cut. And we know that like basic education is part of that. So we need to look at maybe some of the agencies to see what they can do, right? Because everybody's working pretty skinny right now. Private sector, public sector, that's what we need to be looking at. Still, again, probably temporary. So. Just
Good, I like that. So have more of a kind of a intermediate approach in terms of where we're going to be in the next 4 years, and at the same time making sure that we have businesses here in the next 4 years.
Right.
I like that. So how should we balance our commitments and investments with the economic impacts that have been felt statewide?
Well, that's kind of the same answer to the first two questions, right? It's kind of the general thing. So we know we have to have a certain amount of revenue to get through this next year or two. We need to make sure that we're not going in with a sledgehammer. We're going in and looking individually at different sections to determine what we need to cut, how we can cut, if we should cut. Because we certainly know that there's, like I said, a lot of areas where we don't want to cut or can't cut. So, but I think as we've gone along, there's been a lot of great innovation and in business. And so a lot of our investments and commitments, we need to make sure that we have enough local control to be able to do the things that we need to do for our community. So as an example, we had an issue with the public meetings law, right? Requirements that you had to meet, that we've had to meet for years. But we find out with this COVID situation that downtown Seattle is different than Yakima or some small town. So what they did was they carved out an ability for the small rural areas to have their meetings safely, but they were able to do it, create that for them so that they could do business better, because some of them don't have the money to do what we're trying to do, right? With this, or the back broadband. Like I've got senators out in the rural area that can't get through a Zoom call without being kicked off 2 or 3 times, right? So we've learned a lot of things, and I think that kind of helps the entire situation. I mean, the education that we're getting about all this and where we failed in the schools, right? At education of our children and what they didn't have, what they need to have to get a good education. So we need to think about that, because that's also one of our investments. In fact, that's our top priority, right? Is education. So I think that understanding where our failures are with education and our kids. And so I think we're learning a lot, but we have a ways to go, but that's okay. As long as we use this as a learning tool, then, we'll be better. So.
Good. So it's about assessment and tailoring in terms of what specific is needed by each constituent. Gotcha. In business.
Well, and also, some of the things that we're doing now, or that we were required to do before, and we let slide, or we've had proclamations to change the rules up a bit, maybe those need to stay permanent. Because if we can do them in COVID and do it safely, maybe we should be looking at doing that across the board.
Yeah.
These individual proclamations.
Good.
Right?
Good. So final question for you, Senator. What are your overall goals for the upcoming legislative session?
Well, I think it's going to be my job to make sure that we're heard, that those of us that do not want new taxes or increased taxes, capital gains, income tax, any of that, we have been told that pretty much everything is on the table. So I want to be able to make sure that we are at the table. At this point right now, I feel like there's 147 of us legislators that really haven't been able to have any input on how we are reacting to this COVID pandemic. So I think that getting back to the table is a big deal. And so I'm looking forward to that in session. So that's kind of a number one thing. The other part for me is a couple of other things, is government accountability and transparency. So, I've been working on title only bills. I don't like those at all. I have a small business bill of rights that just barely failed. It got all the way through, and then at the very end, it just didn't have enough time to get through. And so it's another one of those where it's just helping to encourage businesses working with agencies. We worked with 24 agencies, the governor's office and the attorney general's office, and that it moved through, and it's well perceived by everyone. And so gonna work on that one. I've got another one that's delineates the responsibilities of the three executive branches. So we see where sometimes the legislature gives away some of its power to agencies, and so it addresses that. And then, of course, I've done a lot of work on domestic violence, and so I'm going to be continuing with working on that. I have the bill that passed, which was the Tiffany Hill Act, that I'm getting actually international requests on that. And so we're looking to, and across the country, and so we're looking to see how we can move this type of technology to other legislators so that it can help other domestic violence victims.
Well, I'm excited, and I know Clark County Association of Realtors are excited to continue to work with you. And so I want to thank you for your time today, and see, are there any parting comments that you have before we turn off?
Well, just thank you for the opportunity to speak to you guys today. And I'm looking forward to working with you next year and for the next 4 after that. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank
and
you.
have a good afternoon, Senator.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.